I didn't have anything in the B's, so we're going to go on to C now. The next one is climax. This is difficult for students to catch sometimes because the climax can be very dramatic or it can be very subtle. But the climax is the point where everything changes. It's sometimes it's the point of most intense interest. That's the way I was taught. But when you're looking at something psychological or something where the character finally understands something, it can be much more not quite as explicit, but more of a subtle kind of thing. So it's where, from that point on, everything changes. That's my version of that, so that's kind of, doesn't sound too scholarly, does it? All right, comic relief. This is so important. Comic relief always occurs when you have a story that has intense moments. You've probably been to movies where the story gets so intense and finally something funny happens, everyone just laughs, and it releases the tension. Comic relief. We also have that in literature. Shakespeare uses it quite frequently, but when the character gets, or the reader gets so involved with what's happening to the character and just needs something to give them an emotional lift. Well, we're back to our poetic turns. Consonants. Consonants, assonance, and alliteration are all very closely related. Consonants is a repetition of the consonants, but it can be anywhere within the word, not at the beginning as it has to be with alliteration. Moving right along. Oh, I got conflict. How did I miss conflict? That's a big one. There are basically 4 types of conflict in literature. There's man against man, man against nature, man against himself, and man against the supernatural. And you'll have variations of these conflicts within a longer text. The longer the text, the more conflicts you're going to have. But when you're talking about the conflict of the work as a whole, look at what's going on with the protagonist. What is the protagonist's main goal, and what is the conflict that's keeping that from happening? Sounds kind of like the same thing as the antagonist, I suppose it could all, but it's the type of conflict that's happening with the antagonist. You can also have man against society, which would actually be man against man. All right, let's go to the D's. The next one I want to talk to you about is denouement. Did you hear the nasal on that? Denouement, and it's spelled D-E-N-O-U-E-M-E-N-T. That's a French word that means to unknot something, and it usually follows the climax of the plot, and it's where there's an understanding. The mystery unravels, the main character has a little bit more insight, and it's softer. It's softer than the climax, but it's where kind of maybe the epiphany happens there, but you just understand things. That's the denouement. Dialogue, of course, you know, is the actual talk between characters. I'd like to talk to you about doppelganger. I'm sure you've heard that in some of your college courses, but that's not a bad term to talk with your students about. For one thing, it sounds like it's fun to say, and it is. It's German, and it means you're double. It's like a mirror image, the antithesis of something. So you have and we all have it. It's the good twin, the evil twin. All of us have a doppelganger. That's the part of us that we keep hidden from everyone else, the dark side, so to speak. So you need to know what that one is as well. The next one that I'd like to talk to you about is figurative language. Oh, I missed an E. I missed epiphany, and that's an understanding. And usually it's like a sudden understanding. Something happens and all at once it's like, oh, that's what that means, or oh, that's why this happened. We have epiphanies all the time. Okay, figurative language. This is just a whole assortment of things. You have personification, which is where inanimate things take on human characteristics, or animals take on human characteristics. You think of the fables or the stories where the animals can talk and all this kind of stuff. Hyperbole, which is exaggeration. Metaphor and simile, both very similar. Both of those are comparisons of unlike objects. If it's a simile, it's going to use the words like or as. Her eyes were as deep as wells. But the metaphor will not have like or as. It just says that something is. Her eyes were deep wells. You see the difference? I'm sure there's some others. Onomatopoeia, that's the sound, the word sounds as it's spelled. Slap, pow, bang, wow, those things. All of this is to achieve an effect. in the reader so that you are able to visualize or hear things in your mind. Flashback, that's where the action is taking place in the present and then it switches to something in the past. You see this in movies all the time. Sometimes it happens so often that it's a little bit difficult to understand what's happening. You have to watch the movie more than once. Characterization. Flat characters and round characters are dynamic and static characters. Round is your main character and maybe a minor character, but you always the main character. The character fills out as you read. It's dynamic, it's growing, it's changing, it's learning, it's understanding. And then you have flat or static characters, and they don't change. These are just your characters that are kind of filling spots while the rest of the story takes its place. Lots and lots and lots of static or flat characters in literature. That gets us through F, so I think I'll stop right there and reorganize a little bit and then continue.